Since the dawn of MMA, people have been wondering which country produces the most formidable martial artists in the world. It started with Brazil and the US, but in the modern era, Russian athletes are taking over the sport. Today we'll be looking at the top 10 toughest UFC fighters from Russia. To be clear, this list would include fighters from all Russian republics like Dagestan and Chechnya. With that said, let's jump right into it. At number 10, we have Abubakar Nurmagomedov. Before we start talking about the top fighters, you should know that this list is specifically for the Russian athletes who competed in the UFC. So fighters like Fedor, who many of us think of as the greatest Russian MMA fighter of all time, wouldn't appear on the list just because he never competed in the UFC. Now let's get back to Abubakar. When you have the last name Nurmagomedov, there's a high expectation from you. Abubakar, or as his friends call him, Manap, is a UFC welterweight with 17 pro wins and only 3 losses. Making his UFC debut in 2019, Nurmagomedov lost by a triangle choke.
Cranking that, and then he switches straight back to the shin, pulls down and suffocates the eyes.
Since then, he hasn't been very active, fighting only once in 2021. His last fight was at UFC 281, where he beat Godzi in a very close fight. He certainly has the right team and coaches to make some adjustments and become a title contender in the next few years. We'll have to keep our eyes on this Dagestani prospect as he might go on to do great things. Coming in at number 9 is Movsar Evloev. The 28-year-old prospect out of Ingushetia, Russia, is a UFC featherweight. Movsar has an undefeated MMA record of 16-0. Before putting on the 4-ounce gloves, Evloev was a Greco-Roman wrestler, which is one of the best bases for MMA. He made his UFC debut in 2019, and since then, he's won 5 fights in a row. Movsar currently sits pretty at number 10 in the featherweight rankings with his last win against Dan Ige. Before coming into the UFC, Movsar was the 135-pound champion at M1. The 28-year-old is yet to have a win by stoppage inside the octagon, but so far, there haven't been many bumps in his path. The problem with Evloev is the activity. If he can rack up 2 or 3 more wins in 2023, we might be talking about him fighting for the title. Number 8 on our list is Umar Nurmagomedov. You hear the name Nurmagomedov and you think about the elite-level grappling those guys have. Well, so does Umar. But what you won't expect him to do is to be a dynamic striker with an entire arsenal of kicks. The 28-year-old fights in the bantamweight division of the UFC. Just like his cousin Khabib, he's also undefeated with a professional record of 15-0. Fighting out of Dagestan, Umar made his octagon debut in 2021 with a submission win over Sergey Morozov.
Morozov is trying to find that back angle. He's going to sleep. He's out.
It's not often you see a guy making his UFC debut being a -500 favorite, but this guy deserves those odds. He left people in awe of his striking attacks, and since then, he's picked up 2 wins. Nurmagomedov's already considered by many to be one of the best bantamweights in the world, and probably his next fight would be against a ranked opponent. At number 7, we have Askar Askarov. Askarov has already accomplished a great deal in his career. Coming from Dagestan, the 30-year-old fights in the flyweight division. The Sambo grappler maintained an undefeated record for most of his career. The only fight he's ever lost was to Kai Kara France by split decision. Many people argued Askar won, and had he gotten the nod, he would have fought Moreno for the title. He's got some notable names on his record, beating the likes of Tim Elliott and Joseph Benavidez, and fighting to a draw against the 2-time champ Brandon Moreno. If you thought his accomplishments inside the cage were great, the guy won gold in the 2017 Deaflympic in wrestling. He also won countless Sambo tournaments in Dagestan. He's as formidable a grappler as we've ever seen compete at 125 pounds. At number 6 is Alexander Volkov. When you're 6 feet 7 inches tall and represent Russia, people are going to call you Drago from Rocky IV, which is exactly how Volkov earned his nickname. The UFC heavyweight is ranked number 7 in the world at the moment. Volkov is an extremely technical striker who likes to put on a masterclass against the baddest men on the planet. His background is in traditional martial arts. He got his karate black belt before he turned 10 and has also worked a lot on his jiu-jitsu, which has been showing in the last few fights. Drago started competing in pro MMA competition in 2009, and since then he's had over 40 fights. 14 of his appearances have been inside the octagon, and he's picked up wins over some great fighters like Fabricio Werdum, Alistair Overeem, and Roy Nelson, just to name a few. Making his way into the top 5 is Zabit Makhnovich-Sharipov, another great fighter coming out of Dagestan. Zabit will go down in the history books as one of the biggest what-ifs in MMA. Undefeated inside the octagon, Zabit captivated the entire MMA fan base with his flashy striking combined with high-level grappling. The 31-year-old was on his way to fighting for a title title after beating Calvin Kattar in 2019, but he just disappeared. Many people thought of him as the future of MMA because he was as complete a fighter as we've ever seen. The Kung Fu practitioner hasn't competed for more than 3 years. He was ranked number 3 in the division when he left. Many people close to him have been saying that he's retired and wants to become a doctor. So it's very likely we won't see this once-in-a-lifetime talent in the cage again. Had he stayed and worked on his cardio, he might have become a long reigning champ. At number 4, Khamzat Chimaev. Well, if it isn't the Wolf. Many of you may have put him in a different spot, but the truth is, Chimaev has proved himself to be the real deal. Fighting out of Chechnya, the Wolf came into the UFC with an undefeated record and the confidence of an untouchable guy, and in large part, he's maintained his reputation. In 4 of his 5 UFC fights, he didn't even absorb a single significant strike. Imagine dominating the best fighters in the world like that. The only fight this undefeated monster didn't finish was against Gilbert Burns. Many people already think he could be the champ at 2 different weight classes. The sky's the limit for Khamzat. Let's see how far he can take his stardom. Coming in at number 3 is Petr Yan. Arguably the best boxer in the UFC and one of the greatest bantamweights to ever live, Petr Yan is an absolute machine. With the nickname No Mercy, expect nothing else from him. The former 2-time bantamweight champ is facing a tough skid in his career. He's lost 3 bouts inside the octagon, but you could easily make a case that he should have won all 3. Despite coming off back-to-back losses, Yan is still one of the best in the world. He's like a computer inside the octagon that reads and then destroys his opponents. There's no doubt that if he decides to stay in the UFC, he'll make another title run and maybe even capture the belt again at some point. The runner-up on our list is Islam Makhachev. The reigning, defending, and undisputed lightweight champ, Islam Makhachev has reserved his spot at number 2. But no one would be surprised if he goes on to become the greatest fighter from Russia in the next few years. Islam trained with Khabib and coach Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov since he was a kid. It was Mr. Nurmagomedov's wish that as soon as Khabib retires, Islam takes over the division, which is exactly what happened. Makhachev is currently on an 11-fight win streak, and in his last win, he captured gold by finishing the champ of all time, Charles Oliveira. Even though his reign has just begun, people have very high expectations, and so far, he seems to be fulfilling those expectations.
About a lot of problems.
I think what's going to be interesting to see who has the advantage. Oh, big left hand. That's it. Wow.
At number 1, we have Khabib Nurmagomedov. Who else would be the best fighter from Russia than arguably the GOAT of MMA, Khabib Nurmagomedov? 29 have tried, and 29 have failed. The most dominant force in the history of MMA. Khabib is the only UFC champion who retired undefeated and undisputed. The Eagle is also one of the biggest names in MMA, and now he uses his star power to help his teammates and other people in his region to get big contracts and make a living as a professional athlete. Khabib never lost or got dropped. He never got cut. His reign will always be remembered, and he's without a doubt the greatest lightweight of all time.
Nope, it's on the chin.
There's the tap! Still undisputed! Khabib Nurmagomedov!
Many people believe he's the greatest MMA grappler, and he retired in his prime, as he had made a promise to his mother. Who knows how far his reign would have gone had he decided to stay, because he was disposing of the best fighters in the world with relative ease. That's a wrap for this video. Do you agree with our list? If not, who would you rather have on it? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.